Hey folks, welcome back to the Mac and Mike show. He's Mike. I'm Mac. Yeah, I think I got that right. No, listen, we haven't been together for a while, so it's good to see Mike in person. And we rode around today trying to find something I could eat, and we ended up with pizzas from Boom. What was it?
Bobas?
No, it was Boom.
Bombos?
Yeah, something. It was an unusual name, and the pizza was pretty good. Next time we're here, we'll have to get some pizza there and maybe try some different varieties. Anyways, Mike and I were talking about a bunch of stuff today, like we usually do, and we weren't on the back porch. We were in the kitchen because it's a bit brisk out there today. So we're probably going to jump around to a couple of different subjects because I said to Mike, "What should we talk about today?" And as we were talking, every now and again, Mike would say, "We should talk about that. We should talk about that." Well, what I want to talk about first is that the Iran war is ongoing, and yesterday or today we lost one of our F-15s, and a couple of people who were operating this aircraft ended up in southwestern Iran, and we recovered one of them. But the other one is still missing. And if I could just for a moment give kudos to my brother Mike here, he was the guy that used to teach these pilots what to do when they were shot down, how to escape and evade and to live and to not die and not get captured. Mike, what are these guys, what that person, whether it's a guy or a gal or a pilot or somebody else, what are they doing right now?
Well, if they've been captured, they're trying to resist interrogation. That's the first thing. First thing that happens when you're captured is you go through a field interrogation, which you're trained for. And then that's usually the people that'll beat you up and hurt you. And then later, you're taken to a central command place where they're really interested in the intelligence that you can provide. So they're a little bit more crafty in the way they deal with you. But the first thing you do after you eject or bail out of an aircraft over enemy territory is you have to know the terrain. For example, I told Mac I was in Afghanistan and sat down in front of a live satellite feed with a couple guys in a tent. And we were supposed to plan the ingress and egress routes for the fighter jets, the bombers, the psychological ops, all the different intel people going in and out of Iran from the south, and trying to determine where, if they got shot down, they should try and make their way to this point to get recovered. And, you know, you're typically looking for places where they can find shelter, food, water. It was just a moonscape. I said, sir, there's no place to hide. There is no place to find water. There are a few wadies, as we call them. It's a bend in a dry river. And if you dig into the side at the right time of year, you might find some moisture. But wherever these guys are, it's depending on the terrain. Now, when I first heard it today, it had not yet been confirmed. So when Mac got here, he said it was confirmed. So you come down, you have a C9 Canopy. That's the type of parachute you have. It's got multiple colors. You know, one is for peacetime so that you can signal. It's a bright orange. Another one's, you know, white. So if you can, in an Arctic zone, you could use that to hide out in the snow. You have a desert sort of color, and then you have a foliage color. So you're supposed to pack up your parachute right away and bury it and cut out the parts that match the terrain that you're going to need. That's one technique. You may not have time. If the enemy sees you falling, it's open land. You know, it's like just get the hell out of there and start running. A lot of times you're injured, though, especially when you eject. You can have a back injury or something of that nature, legs, limbs, things like that. So as soon as you hit the ground, after you've gone through your checklist, you know, as soon as you bail out and you get your wits about you, you look up at your canopy, you discard your oxygen mask, visor up, pull your 4-line modification, start steering into the wind, you deploy an ML4 kit, which gives you stabilization on the way down, you prepare for landing, you know, face into the wind so it, you know, drags you backwards, all that kind of great stuff. So as soon as you hit the ground, if you can't bury, you've got to grab whatever you can. You have a survival vest on. Everybody has a vest. It's got the radio, you got flares, you got a knife, you got some water on you, you know, water bag, you got a tourniquet, first aid kit, you know, knives, things like that. And you just book. You try and find shelter. And then whenever you get far enough away that you think you're half safe, then you pull out your map. You always have a map. So you orient yourself. Today they have GPSs, so you can know exactly where you are, and then you start heading for a waypoint, a predetermined waypoint for recovery if you can. If you can't, you just take shelter wherever you can. You avoid people, you avoid waterways, you avoid population centers. In other words, if it looks like the easy route, you go the opposite way because you want to stay away from people. You never know if it's going to be an IRGC guy or if it's going to be a civilian that wants to turn you in. Could be a civilian friendly if you're lucky, and you just get out of Dodge. And then, of course, you start your communications with your, whatever type of radio they're using today, I don't know. Usually today, I think they're satellite uplinks, and we have other specialized tactics for broadcasting where you are in the clear so the enemy can't find you, but your rescue people can, and that's where your special forces, your PJs, and your others start trying to come in after you, go through your interrogation. They interrogate you because back in Vietnam, and I know I'm rambling, they used to lure in helicopters that were rescuing people. So today we have a series of questions that we ask so that we know it's actually you, that only you would know. And that's filed everywhere electronically. We pass it along. So it's rough. It's scary, But that's the first thing, is get the hell out of Dodge and take the roughest path out you can, unless you're injured, and then you're kind of screwed.
Well, there you have it from the expert, folks. One of the two people in that plane were recovered already. The other, as far as I know, from this morning around noontime, they were still looking for the other one. So the good news is that that person was in a pretty remote part of Iran, not very densely populated. So there's a good chance we'll still get our other Air Force person. I'm pretty sure it was an Air Force. It was an F-15. I think they're
15 would be Air Force.
So at any rate, what else did we talk about today? I know, here's something that I want to talk about. I know you and I haven't talked about this, but I talked to my brother about this the other day, and I talked to my son last night. I want to give Donald Trump kudos for making the decision to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Now, we may have talked about this already, Mike, but here, the aspect I want to talk about at this time is from the political perspective. I heard somebody saying, I think it may have been James Carville, who is the former Clinton guru for elections and politics. What Carville was saying, as soon as the midterm elections are held, the Democrats will take the majority, and they will decide to go after Trump and impeach him.
And his family, and his friends,
yes,
and everyone. His kids, the whole thing.
My retort to this telling of this story to both my son and my brother, as I was talking to them, was, I want to give Donald Trump a tremendous amount of credit. And from this perspective, if you're a politician and your world is run by what's good for me politically, Donald Trump, by all measures, should never have gone after Iran to stop their development of a nuclear weapon. Why? Well, he's president. Historically, and this is true for the last great number of years, the party that takes the White House, and there's a switch in the White House, the next year, the following midterm election, that is the off-year election from the presidential cycle, is that in the off-year election, the party in the White House will lose seats in the Congress. They will lose seats in the House and in the Senate. So the Republicans have very narrow margins of majority in both the House and the Senate. So the politically astute decision for Donald Trump to make was, don't rock the boat. Don't change things. We had the economy moving in the right direction after the dreadful Biden years. Prices were coming down. Gasoline at the pump was clearly almost half of what we were paying under Biden. We were creating more jobs. The job numbers were really, really strong, especially in the manufacturing and construction sectors. So the easy thing, the politically astute thing for Donald Trump to do is don't make waves. Keep things going the way they're going. Let people get, pay less for gas and keep them happy. That way, in November, when the election comes around, if people are happy with what's going on, they're happy because their 401k or their IRA is up, making more money there. Prices are down, down, down. Gasoline is cheap, cheap, cheap. That's good for not losing seats in the off-year election, that is the midterms after the White House changes political parties. But that's not what he did. What he did was made the difficult decision that he believes will pay dividends to our children and their children and their children in a world where the world's leading sponsor of state-sponsored terrorism will not have nuclear weapons and won't have the money to give to their terrorist proxies, the Houthis and the Hezbollah and the Hamas groups. He made the decision to attack Iran, meaning that he's opening himself up to higher prices in the grocery store, higher prices at the gas pump, an uncertain stock market, all of which have happened since he decided to attack Iran. So while it may have been the right decision, it may have been the right decision for peace and prosperity for the world, not just for the United States of America, but for the world, it is a politically stupid decision to make. But he made the decision that I would argue is the right decision in keeping the nation of Iran, the world's leading sponsor of state-sponsored terrorists, to not be able to have those terrorist proxies, not be able to threaten the world's oil supply by dominating the Straits of Hormuz with their many weapons. So, in a way, what he did was a great gamble, not for his political future, maybe for his legacy, but certainly for the safety and security of the world. Is that an appropriate position for me to take, Mike?
Yeah, it's pretty clear cut. He certainly wasn't thinking about his political future or the political future of the Republican Party. Sometimes you just have to do the right thing. And, I listen to the people on the left, which used to be for taking care of Iran, say all the negative things about this. He doesn't have a plan, this, that, the other. The bottom line is, if you look at it practically and through a realistic lens, if it's this hard to get all of their missiles and drones, just imagine if we would have waited another 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, they got hundreds of thousands of these little drone things by then, if not now. We don't know how many they have. And so, yeah, better now than later, because later it just would have been harder and worse. And who knows if we ever would have had the, national will to go take care of the problem. That's mine. Man.
Let me ask you a question, Mike. There's been a couple of questions. I think both Secretary of State Rubio and President Trump have indicated that when we asked our NATO allies for a minimal amount of help, and I'm not talking about them getting involved with bombing or firing missiles or any weaponry at Iran, but things like using their airspace or landing in air bases that were in their geographic territory. Not a single NATO ally stepped up to support our effort on this war in Iran. What do you think about that?
Well, it's a good question because you can look at it through their lens to start with. So they feel slighted, generally, not all of them, but I'm sure a lot of them, because Trump's been talking trash about NATO, which is the truth, but he's the guy that's willing to say the truth. And so there's a little bit of bad blood there. He's threatened pulling out of NATO before. He has publicly embarrassed all of those nations. And I'm not saying they're not deserving of the embarrassment that they received. The second thing that they would probably argue is you did not consult with us before you decided to do this. I guess you could make the argument that Bush and others did consult with European allies, but frankly, Trump was dealing with very sensitive, highly classified information, probably only shared by Netanyahu and the Israeli government in the United States. And the reason he didn't go talking about it, and Congress said that, is because every time there has been consultation, there have been leaks in the past. And when you're going to do something like this, the element of surprise is paramount. So you can't risk trying to form a coalition and get these people on board. So there you have the two positions. Europe saying and NATO saying, you didn't consult with us, and Trump saying, we didn't want the leaks. Is he being harsh on them for not stepping in now is the other question. That's up to each country for themselves to decide, and you as an American citizen to decide if you think one way or the other. Not letting us overfly their airspace like Spain, the Iberian Peninsula. Oh my God. When they said that, see, I can understand not landing at Sigonella. Now, that's in Italy, that's Sicily. It's off the coast. We can land there as NATO troops as long as it's during normal peacetime. In wartime, there is a special provision, it's been there since 1954, that you must consult before attempting to land loaded B-52s, which is what was headed there. And they said, oh, no. Can't land here. Not with munitions on board. But the Spain thing was completely different. That was just an overflight. No such 1954 agreement exists there. And I think we ought to, maybe we need to take NATO apart one country by one country.
You know, Iran sent missiles to attack Gibraltar.
Oh,
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Now, they didn't land. They didn't do any damage in Gibraltar. We took them down before they arrived. But isn't that an act of war? And isn't Gibraltar a base that is joint UK and US?
Yes.
And if Iran shoots missiles at UK, whether it's actual UK geography or UK base or airplanes or troops, shouldn't UK take that as an act of war?
You would think, but
well, but again, my point is that with these kinds of circumstances, where, as you noted, Spain wouldn't even let us fly over their airspace, fly through their airspace over their ground, what purpose does NATO have, and what amount of reliance, or what amount of security, what amount of expected cooperation should the United States anticipate from NATO allies? And if we cannot expect cooperation, should there be a NATO? Should the United States of America be in NATO?
that's the question. And I don't see the necessity of it anymore.
You know, Mike, if you're my friend and I call you up and say, Mike, I need a favor, I need some help, or I need you to do this for me, or I need a couple of bucks, can you help me out? And you say to me, oh, gee, Alan, I'm sorry, I can't help you. But then next week you call me and say, you know, Mac, I find that I'm a little bit short. Can you lend? Why would I want to support you when you need it if you couldn't support me whenever I needed? And I think that's the way the United States of America has to look at these alliances that we have. You know, we have 35,000 troops along the DMZ in Korea. Should those troops be there? Why are they there? In my opinion, this is not national policy, but in my opinion, those troops are there because if the North Koreans attack South Korea, we may not be motivated to help defend South Korea. We would be a little bit upset if we had thousands of dead Americans, and for that reason, we would go to war. And I think those 35,000 troops at the DMZ are kind of like a tripwire. If those troops get attacked, we will defend them. And I'm not sure, based on this very small ask we had of other NATO nations, I'm not sure that we can depend on NATO to have our back if we needed them. I guarantee you this. If Russia came streaming through Poland, the Poles and other people in Eastern Europe would expect the United States of America to defend them with everything we have, including American troops. Not only warships, not only aircraft, not the United States Air Force, but everything we have. And they won't support us.
Well, I don't know about Poland. That may not be the best example. They didn't have anything that they could really provide us in this operation. But I think Poland is one of the top countries that is behind the United States and would follow us anywhere.
Yeah, my language wasn't clear, Mike.
I understand what you're saying.
Poland is the
Right.
keystone to the rest of
Yes.
the rest of Europe. And if the Russians are going to attack
They're coming
Europe,
through there.
they're coming through Poland, and obviously Poland and Hungary, and there are other nations in that have been strong supporters and willing supporters of the United States and our policies. But I know that the United Kingdom absolutely, when Iran was talking about putting mines in the Strait of Hormuz, we don't have any minesweepers anymore. Our last 3 minesweepers we had in our Navy were decommissioned, I think about a year ago, some time ago anyways. And UK, United Kingdom, Great Britain, does have minesweepers yet. So we asked United Kingdom for minesweepers. We asked other NATO countries for minesweepers. And you know what they said?
Yeah.
We'd rather not get involved.
Yeah.
We don't want to feel like we're attacking Iran. We don't want to feel like we're... So, a couple of weeks later, when we're doing it famously and we've destroyed almost every war-making capability Iran has, they call up and they say, hey, maybe we can get you those minesweepers now. And Trump famously said, we don't want your help.
Yeah. Or it's going to be up to you to open up the strait. We don't need the strait.
Well, that came about famously when the United Kingdom said, Mr. Trump, we're running out of jet fuel in England. And Mr. Trump said, well, look, you got a choice. You can buy jet fuel from the United States because we got lots. Or go get your own jet fuel. Just go over there and get it.
Yeah.
And, I think that's one way of pointing out the absurdity of their position and not being willing to let us use Gibraltar as a strategic point of access to this war. I mean, it's just so, again, obviously you made an excellent point, as you always do. NATO was not consulted before we went into this war. But by the same token, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization should have, I have your back if you need me. And they didn't this time. And I think I think we need to re-examine our participation in NATO. I think there's some nations who couldn't possibly help us, and I don't want to question them. And as you said, maybe we need to look at it on a nation-by-nation basis. I know France was not exactly excited. France has a much better relationship with Iran than we do, and they were very careful. So I don't know what's going to go on there, Mike, and I don't want to drag us down into a conversation on the Iran war. I don't think it's going to last very long. I think that by the end of April, the United States will no longer be conducting offensive operations with the nation of Iran. And I say that with some sense of surety because I don't know how many targets are left. I don't know how much patience the American public is going to have with this war. By the way, I think it's fair to examine the decision to attack Iran because that's a sovereign nation who is not at war with us. And we did have a negotiating team trying to negotiate away their access to uranium, to weapons-grade uranium, when we attacked. Now, to be fair, also on our side, at the negotiating table, the United States of America offered Iran enough nuclear rods to power all of their nuclear energy requirements and give them to them for nothing for as long as they needed them. And they turned down that offer.
That was the thing that broke the camel's back, I can guarantee it.
So what's the necessity for continuing to enrich uranium if we offer you uranium power rods for your nuclear generation plants for eternity, and you say no? I mean, it's obvious the only reason you want uranium at that point in time is because you want to create a nuclear weapon. And by the way, people say all the time, Iran was not a threat to us. No, not in the traditional sense. Iran was not going to send a ballistic missile to the United States with a nuclear warhead on it, because even if they had the ability to do all of those things, which I don't think they do, we would have been able to intercept the missile and take it down.
Well, maybe. Remember, an ICBM is quite different than the rockets that we're talking about, the missiles we're talking about now that don't leave the atmosphere.
I understand that, Mike. I'm just confident. We have a directed beam weapon that we use to protect our ships from these drones, and I'm just convinced we have the ability to take that down. What I'm not convinced we have the ability to protect ourselves with is you could put a nuclear weapon in a crate, in a suitcase size travel case, and you could smuggle it across the border, and you could put it in the trunk of a car, and you could park that, just like they did in Oklahoma City. They parked the truck outside the Murrah building and exploded some gasoline or diesel or something, along with some fertilizer. So if you have an atomic weapon in the trunk of a car and you park that car outside the convenient fill in the blank, choice of where you wanted the destruction to be, your choice of targets. With a nuclear weapon, it's not only the immediate and dramatic destruction of the nuclear weapon, but it's the half-life of the uranium leftover, the radiation, that you can't use that geography for years, unless you want to die from radiation poisoning. So, and you will never convince me that if somebody wants to bring some enemy of the United States wants to bring a nuclear weapon into the United States badly enough, that they have the ability to do it. We're not capable of completely closing our borders, not because we can't, but because we don't have the will to do so. And that's a lot of political and other reasons. As the president asked in his State of the Union message, stand if you agree with this statement. The primary purpose of the government of the United States is to protect the American people. How many people didn't stand up?
Yeah.
So,
one of the other quick things that we could talk about, I guess we've got a few minutes. I'm not sure how long we've been going, 26 minutes or so. It came up with the news the other day. I guess they asked, who's the young lady that's the spokesperson at the podium for Trump?
Kayleigh McEnany?
No, she was last time. Who's the new girl?
Yeah, I know you.
Glad we can't remember her name. She's going to have a baby in May. And anyway, she was asked about the legitimacy of bombing, the electrical grid, things like that.
Carolyn
Levitt. Good kid. And, so I looked into it, and there's two things that come to my mind. I've said this before. I'm not a big fan of the Geneva Convention or the laws of warfare. I understand. Look, in all practicality, it's not good to go after non-military targets. So you don't really need a Geneva Convention. Look, if you're going to war with somebody, you don't typically want to kill their civilians anyway. That doesn't do you any good to win the war, right? So we don't need to institute that into the Geneva Conventions. But the argument is about the electricity is if you shut off the electricity, you might shut it off to hospitals, and if it was wintertime, which it's not, but like Ukraine and Russia, it is, and people could freeze to death. And I understand that. The problem is electricity is a dual-use resource, and the law is very murky on that. So if it's using to, like the bridge that they blew up, if it's being used to support command and control and military operations and movements, they're going to let it slide in the first place. Now, obviously, we don't want to hurt the hospitals. We don't want to hurt the civilians. So if anybody's out there that ever listens to this, which I doubt, that's on the left anyway, just get it in your head. There is no military purpose for hurting civilians intentionally. Now, I will say that Iran, being a terroristic nation and state, has launched missiles deliberately at civilian targets.
Yes.
And once you do that, my argument is this. They say we made a mistake and hit a school. Now, a mistake is a mistake. Okay, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. Set that aside. Collateral damage happens. But it was an IRGC headquarters, okay? So it's not like you could say this was an isolated school all off on its own in the middle of a town with no military application. But once you start intentionally launching missiles at hotels and high-rise buildings and things like that, all cards are on the table. Just don't tell me that we can't bomb infrastructure because it's, quote, civilian use.
The other part of that, Mike, is that if you want to win, you want to win. And you do what's necessary to win. When they told Truman that they had the atomic bomb, Truman said, what? And Truman said, how many American lives will it save? And they said, a couple of million. And he said, okay, drop the bomb. Because he looked at it as if I save more American lives, I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, which is primary purpose of the government of the United States is to
defend the American people.
So here's the thing when you talk about collateral damage. Look in your history book and look at the bombing of Dresden. For 3 days, I think it was 3 days, it was some number of days, we dropped leaflets and pamphlets across the city of Dresden because it was a big industrialized. They did a lot of manufacturing of war materials there, and they said, "Look, people, we're gonna come in there and we're gonna do some real damage to Dresden. If you can, please get out of the way. We don't want to hurt you." And then after they did that for a couple of days, then they completely eliminated the city of Dresden. Google it, or ask your AI to check out the firebombing of Dresden. That was World War II.
Killed more people than the nuclear bomb in Japan.
There was not a living thing left. There was no men, there were no women, there were no dogs, there were no cats, there were no mice. Everything was gone in Dresden, and we felt we needed to do that because what they were doing in Dresden is making the material of war that enabled them to prosecute the war and to kill the Allies, including Americans. So that comes under the heading of winning, you know? And I'm sorry, as people have seen war up close and personal, we both recognize every single alternative other than war needs to be explored fully before making the determination to go to war. But once the decision is made to go to war, then you have to win.
And to win.
You have to win, and you have to have an exit strategy to get our people back safe. Those are the things you must do because that is the primary purpose of the government of the nation. So, am I upset that a number of school children were killed? Yes. Is it our fault? It's unclear whether or not it is our fault or not. And there's many different ways to interpret that. Was it bad intelligence? Was it even our weapon? But regardless, war is not a pretty thing, and a lot of innocent people are going to get killed. That's just the way every war has always been. It's important to note that unlike many armies and many militaries, we don't do terrible things on an individual basis to the people we conquer. And that's not necessarily true of all armies and all militaries. And in the case of Iran, unpleasant things they do to their own citizens. So, yeah. Alrighty, Mike, I don't know. Do we have other things we want to talk about? You know, the one thing we talked about, you said we should, was I mentioned about having 30 different subscriptions of 30 different topics, and what subscriptions do we need and not need, and how do we manage those? Do we want to talk about that or save that for another time?
Save that for another time.
All right, then I guess it's time to say Mac and Mike
out.